The Chicago skyline glittered against the night, a mosaic of ambition and power. But none shone brighter than the newly unveiled headquarters of Carver Enterprises. Its glass facade loomed over the city, a monument to wealth and control, reflecting the city lights like a crown jewel. Tonight, the Carver family was throwing a grand opening gala, an ostentatious display of their dominance in the corporate world. And standing at the edge of this spectacle was Emily Carver, the outcast daughter, staring up at the tower with a mix of dread and defiance. Emily had no intention of attending. The invitation, with its gold-embossed lettering and heavy cardstock, had nearly ended up in her apartment's trash bin, but a call from her old friend Rachel had changed her mind. "Show up, Em," Rachel had urged, her voice steady over the phone. "Let them see you're not broken." So here she was, in a sleek black dress that hugged her frame, bold enough to make a statement, understated enough to keep her armor intact. If she was walking into a lion's den, she'd do it on her terms. The moment she stepped inside, the opulence hit her like a wave. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across the ballroom, the air thick with the scent of champagne and high-end cologne. Laughter and murmured deals filled the space, business tycoons, politicians, and Chicago's elite mingling in a carefully choreographed dance of power. This was the Carver way, control masquerading as charm. At the center of it all stood William Carver, her father, the CEO, his presence commanding as he laughed with a senator, his eyes scanning the room but never landing on her. He hadn't acknowledged her arrival, and Emily wasn't sure if that was intentional or just indifference. Across the room, Victoria Carver, her stepmother, stood with Sophia, Emily's half-sister, both radiating polished perfection, their eyes locked onto Emily, their lips curling with faint amusement, like predators sizing up prey. Emily squared her shoulders, her pulse quickening. This wasn't a welcome, it was a setup. She moved forward, weaving through the crowd, her heels clicking against the marble floor, determined to play their game without flinching. Halfway across the ballroom, she spotted it, a table near the entrance, elegantly arranged with name tags for the guests. Victoria's signature touch, she called it networking. Emily knew it was control. She skimmed the names absently at first. William Carver, CEO. Victoria Carver, Carver Foundation. Ethan Carver, future heir. Sophia Carver, social star. Then her eyes landed on hers. Emily Carver, the family's burden. Her breath caught, her fingers tightening instinctively. For a moment, she thought it was a mistake, a cruel prank, but then she heard Sophia's laugh, sharp and deliberate, cutting through the hum of the crowd. Emily turned to see Sophia holding a flute of champagne, her eyes glinting with malice. "Oh, come on, Em," she drawled, raising her glass. "Don't tell me you're offended by a little joke." Victoria stood beside her, her smile smooth as silk. "Lighten up, dear," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Events like these are meant to be fun." The words were a blade, subtle but sharp, designed to wound without drawing blood. Around them, guests stole glances, their whispers barely concealed. No one intervened, no one ever did. This was the Carver playbook, a calculated humiliation, just subtle enough that if Emily reacted, she'd be the one who looked unhinged. Heat rose in her chest, but Emily refused to let it show. Her pulse pounded, but she forced her expression into something unreadable. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of a scene. Instead, she smoothed out the name tag, aligning it perfectly with the others on the table, and plucked a champagne glass from a passing server. Turning to face the room, she raised the glass slightly, her lips curving into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. If they wanted a show, she'd give them one, but not the one they expected. The chatter buzzed around her, but Emily's mind was elsewhere, locked on the name tag, Sophia's smirk, and the memories it dredged up. She moved through the crowd like a ghost, present but detached, every polite nod and murmured toast part of the act. This was a stage, and she was the only one refusing to play her assigned role. But the weight of the evening was suffocating, and she needed air. Slipping toward the back of the venue, she stepped onto the balcony, letting the cool Lake Michigan breeze wash over her. She should have left the moment she saw that name tag. But something held her. Something deeper than pride or defiance. Then she heard it. Strange, isn't it? How her mother just vanished from the picture. The voice was low, deliberate, coming from a group of investors near the bar. Emily froze, her grip tightening on the railing. The man swirled his whiskey. His tone casual, but the words hit like a punch. William chuckled, his voice measured. Life takes people in different directions. The investor smirked. Sure, but some disappear more thoroughly than others. William's smile didn't falter, but Emily caught the flicker in his eyes, a warning. The conversation shifted, laughter filling the space, but she barely heard it. Her pulse raced. Was her mother forced out? Was her absence not her choice? She turned, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on Rachel. Unlike the others, Rachel wasn't watching the investors, she was watching William and Victoria. Her expression guarded. Emily's stomach twisted. Rachel knew something. The weight in her chest grew heavier. And she knew she needed answers. Slipping away from the crowd, she moved down a hallway lined with offices. Her steps quick but silent. She knew this building well, before she became an inconvenience. Carver Enterprises was supposed to be her future too. William's office door was slightly ajar, an anomaly for a man who never left anything unsecured. Something told her to step inside. The room smelled of leather and aged bourbon. Its bookshelves and massive mahogany desk a testament to his authority. Everything was in perfect order. Except for one drawer, slightly open. Her heart pounded, but she reached for it. Inside was a stack of documents, business reports. Nothing unusual, until her fingers brushed an envelope. Yellowed with time, her name scrawled across it in her mother's unmistakable handwriting. Swallowing hard, Emily opened it. Emily, I tried to reach you. But they wouldn't let me. I hope one day you find this. The words blurred as her vision swam. She gripped the letter tighter, forcing herself to read on. Her mother wrote about the divorce. How William and Victoria had controlled everything. Even her ability to see Emily. How they'd spun a narrative to ensure that when she was gone, Emily would believe she'd abandoned her. How she'd never wanted to leave her daughter behind. The Carver name is built on lies. The letter warned. Money laundering, coercion, secrets buried beneath their wealth. Be careful, Emily. They don't let go of people like us. Her breath came in sharp bursts. She'd spent years believing her mother had walked away, resenting her for it, but it was a lie, a carefully constructed one. A shadow fell across the room, and Emily spun around, heart racing. Rachel stood in the doorway, her eyes flickering to the letter. You found it, she said softly. Emily's voice trembled. You knew? Rachel hesitated. Not everything, but I suspected. Fury and grief tangled inside her. Why didn't you tell me? Rachel stepped closer, her voice low but firm. Because you weren't ready, and because they expect you to lose control. If you lash out now, they win. Emily clenched her jaw, understanding but hating it. She folded the letter carefully, tucking it into her clutch. This wasn't over. Straightening her dress, she stepped back into the gala, her resolve hardening. The clinking of champagne glasses filled the air, but all she could hear was her mother's words. They wouldn't let me reach you. Every smiling face was a mask. Every laugh a lie. The Carvers had built an empire on deception. And Emily was no longer their pawn. Tonight, they'd tried to break her. But she was just getting started. Emily Carver had been pushed to the edge, branded as the family's burden, and cast out by the very people who should have protected her. But the Carvers, her father William, stepmother Victoria, half-sister Sophia, and half-brother Ethan, had underestimated her. They thought they could silence her with humiliation and lies. They were wrong. Standing in her small Chicago apartment, the city's skyline a distant glow beyond her window, Emily clutched the incriminating documents she'd uncovered. Proof of Carver Enterprises' darkest secrets. Her mother's letter, tucked safely in her clutch, burned in her mind. The Carver name is built on lies, money laundering, coercion, secrets buried beneath their wealth. This wasn't just about clearing her name anymore. It was about tearing down the empire that had stolen her mother and her future. Emily's first move was calculated and deliberate. She reached out to old contacts, hackers, private investigators, and a journalist with a reputation for exposing corporate corruption. These were people she'd met during her brief time working at Carver Enterprises. Before William had sidelined her, she fed them fragments of what she'd found: bank transfers funneled through Victoria's so-called Carver Foundation, offshore accounts tied to shell companies, and falsified reports that inflated the company's profits. The foundation, Victoria's pride and joy, was a front for laundering millions. And Emily had the receipts, emails, ledgers, and wire confirmations. Her contacts worked fast, verifying the data and building a case that could withstand scrutiny. But Emily knew evidence alone wouldn't be enough. The Carvers were masters of spin. She needed a stage. That stage came in the form of Carver Enterprises' annual investor meeting, held in the same gleaming Chicago headquarters where her humiliation had begun. The event was a who's who of Wall Street titans, hedge fund managers, and media moguls, all gathered to hear William Carver's vision for the company's future. Emily wasn't invited, but she didn't need an invitation. Dressed in a tailored navy suit that screamed confidence, she slipped past security with a forged badge, her heart pounding but her steps steady. In her bag was a USB drive loaded with the damning files and a stack of printed dossiers, each one a ticking bomb. The conference room was a sea of suits and egos, the air thick with anticipation as William took the stage, his charisma filling the space. Victoria sat to his left, poised and untouchable, while Ethan and Sophia flanked him, the perfect image of a united family. Emily waited in the back, her presence unnoticed until the moment was right. William was mid-speech, touting transparency and innovation, when Emily stepped forward, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The room turned, a ripple of confusion spreading. William's eyes narrowed, but he kept his composure. "Good morning," Emily said, her voice clear and commanding, cutting through the murmurs. "Before you invest another dime in Carver Enterprises, I have something you need to see." She placed the stack of dossiers on the long conference table, each one labeled with the names of the investors present. Gasps echoed as they opened the files, their faces paling at the sight of bank records, emails, and signed contracts implicating the Carvers in fraud. Emily pressed a button on a remote, and the massive screen behind William flickered to life, displaying a timeline of transactions, millions siphoned through Victoria's foundation, funneled to untraceable accounts. "For years," Emily said, her voice steady, "you've trusted the Carver name. Let me show you what it's really worth." The room erupted. Investors shouted questions, their voices overlapping in a frenzy. Reporters, sensing blood in the water, surged forward, cameras flashing. Ethan lunged from his chair, knocking dossiers to the floor. "You're lying," he roared, his face red with rage. "This is sabotage." But the evidence was undeniable, and the investors weren't buying his outburst. Sophia, usually the picture of poise, shrank back, her eyes darting to the exits as whispers about her own scandal, a sham engagement to a debt-ridden financier, began to surface. Victoria remained eerily still, her gaze locked on Emily. But for the first time, there was a crack in her icy facade: uncertainty. William stood, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Emily, enough." It wasn't a plea, it was a command, laced with a chilling certainty. But Emily didn't flinch. "No, father," she said, her eyes meeting his. "You don't get to decide that anymore." She turned to the reporters, microphone in hand, and delivered the final blow. "Now tell me, who's the real burden in this family?" The words was a spark igniting the inferno that followed. Within hours, the story was everywhere. Carver Enterprises rocked by fraud allegations. CEO William Carver steps down. Ethan Carver blacklisted from Wall Street. Sophia's engagement collapsed under the weight of her fiancé's exposed debts. And Victoria's carefully curated image as a philanthropist crumbled as her foundation was investigated. Emily watched the fallout from her apartment. The TV blaring headlines that tore the Carver empire apart. She should have felt triumphant. But instead, she felt something deeper: freedom. For the first time, she was untethered from the name that had defined her pain. She kept the name tag from that fateful gala, the family's burden, on her desk. Not as a wound but as a reminder. The Carvers had been her burden. Not the other way around. She poured a glass of wine, the city lights twinkling beyond her window, and raised it in a silent toast to herself. This wasn't just a victory, it was a rebirth. The lesson wasn't lost on her. Family isn't always the safe harbor it's supposed to be. Sometimes, it's a cage built on control and betrayal. And the bravest thing you can do is walk away. Emily thought of her mother, erased by the Carver's lies, and vowed to live a life that honored her truth. As she stepped onto her balcony, the Chicago wind cool against her skin, she felt the weight of the past lift. The Carvers would spend years scrambling to salvage their legacy. But Emily was done with them. She was writing her own story now, one where she wasn't the outcast, but the architect of her future. To anyone watching, Emily had a message. If you've ever felt trapped by family, by expectations, by a name that doesn't fit, know this: you don't owe them your silence. You don't have to shrink to make their world comfortable. Sometimes, the only way forward is to choose yourself. And if that resonates, share your story. Have you ever had to walk away from family to find your truth? Is loyalty unconditional? Or is there a line where enough is enough? Drop a comment. Let me know where you're watching from. And if this story hit home, hit that subscribe button. There's more to come, and you won't want to miss it.